Welcome to another episode of Performance Lab. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Donovan, and today we have a truly inspiring guest with us, Dr. Jade Teta. Jade is a renowned hybrid health professional and entrepreneur who has built an amazing career by following his passion. On a personal note, Jade has been a role model and mentor to me as a coach and an entrepreneur. In this episode, we'll dive into Jade's journey from personal training at the age of 15 to becoming a leader in the health and fitness industry. We explore the power of personal branding, the art of content creation, and the importance of authenticity in today's digital landscape. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or someone looking to make a meaningful impact, this conversation is packed with actionable insights and inspiring stories you won't want to miss. So get comfortable and let's dive into this enlightening conversation with Dr. Jade Teta.
Jade, good to see you, brother.
My boy, Michael, what's going on, man? Good to see you. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. So there's so many different areas we could talk about. The first that really is kind of where we're both at right now is building a new business. And so maybe we can just start a little bit with your background in business, maybe a little background in the sciences and all of that as well. And just a quick overview of kind of bring us up to speed.
Yeah. Well, first I'll just cover my background for people who don't know me. So I think a lot of us are like this now, but I would call myself a hybrid health professional. Started at personal training at 15 years old. People raised their eyebrows at that, but that's the first time I got paid to actually do personal training and write programs for people. And that started out with guys on my football team, quickly went to their moms and dads. And that's what I did to pay my way through undergrad, where I got a biochemistry degree and minored in nutrition and psychology. And then I was on my way to traditional medical school. I was actually on my way to East Carolina University Medical School in North Carolina. And at that point in time, I looked at the curriculum, and don't ask me why I did not look at the curriculum previously. But I looked at the curriculum and I saw there was no training in exercise, no training in nutrition, and no training in psychology. And obviously that was what I had been doing and what I was interested in. So that kind of sent me kind of in, I guess, an early depression or not knowing what I wanted to do. I was like, nothing wrong with drugs and surgery. I'm a guy who likes to do what works and not anti-drugs and surgery. It's just not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be doing lifestyle medicine at a time when that wasn't even a term. And I found this little known university at the time called Bastyr University in Seattle, Washington, that trained what was called naturopathic physicians. Probably the worst, since we're talking about business, probably the worst marketing decision anyone ever made to call this profession naturopathic medicine. And everyone told me, Michael, everyone said, do not do this. You're ruining your career. Like, what are you crazy? This is woo-woo witchcraft medicine. And of course, what I did it anyway, because I've always been kind of a renegade in that regard. And I had no idea that naturopathic medicine would turn into functional medicine, would turn into mainstream sort of medicine. And so right after medical school, though, to get us into the business aspect of things, I made another pivot because in the clinic, I quickly saw that my area of expertise was mainly teaching. And still, even in naturopathic medical school, they were very, very weak in exercise. Even though they did more than conventional medicine, they did not do much. They were very, very heavy in nutrition and pretty good in psychology, but not fitness. And so I went home to a non-licensed state. My license to practice medicine is in California and Washington state. And I decided to go back to North Carolina and be a consultant and open up a gym next to a consulting clinic. And this was my first foray into business. And that company was called Metabolic Effect. And at that time, the acronym for the company was ME, Metabolic Effect. And it was all about this idea. Even at that time, I had seen several, passing fads in health and fitness. We had already gone through several of those, detoxing, keto diets, the, Atkins diet, the zone diet, like several of these things that people were fanatical about. And even then I was like, you know what, this would be, by the way, to give people a timeline here. This was 2004 coming out of, naturopathic medical school. And Metabolic Effect was meant to be a company that individualized nutrition, diet, and exercise, or diet, exercise, and psychology. And of course, I knew, and this is maybe the first lesson we can get into, that I can't start a business that way. I've had my first sort of foray into some businesses with some other people while I was in medical school. And I knew I had to focus on one thing. And so what I focused on was fitness. And the thought there was that nutrition was kind of iffy. It was tough, to get people to change their diet. Psychology was also kind of softer, personal development stuff. It was not a lot of people doing a lot there. So I was like, where are people making money and where are the people flocking towards? And they certainly were in the fitness realm. So I think this is the first, sort of idea that I had, that I niched first into fitness. And then I slowly added on nutrition and psychology and built that company to a small little company of 1.2 million. So going from 0 to 1, it took me about a decade to do that, and almost went out of business 2 or 3 times. And then basically I joined forces with a group of guys who they started with Mark Hyman. If you guys know who Mark Hyman is, MD, built that company up. Then they left. That group split apart. Those business partners became my business partners, and we built a company over a decade called first Metabolic Living and then metabolic.com. And we got that to 100 million. And then that business collapsed suddenly about 2 years ago. And so now we find ourselves a timeline right now where I am starting a brand new company, trying to go from 0 to 1 with a company called Next Level Human. And so this is sort of my foray into business. Also gives you a little bit of my background of where I came from. And I think the only last thing I'll leave everyone with, that I am, and I do think as entrepreneurs, this is part of it. I have always been somebody who is someone willing to paint outside the lines, someone who is willing to take risks, someone who goes in directions that most people would not necessarily go. And I don't know, honestly, Michael, that it served me most of the time, but I have learned, I think, that being the way I am, it's the only way I know how to be. A lot of people aren't willing to take the risks that are required to do this. Big rewards, big risks. And so that's where I'll sort of leave you and see where you want to go. I think that paints the picture of who I am and where I've been.
Yeah, perfect. I was actually thinking last week about risk and luck, 2 4-letter words, and how, if you are calculated about your risk, maybe you create more luck. And if you're in that safe space, you might say, oh, I'm unlucky, but you're just not putting yourself out there to create that luck. And that's been kind of a theme in my mind for a while. I know also you've been a content creator as part of your businesses for a decade, which makes when like your podcasts were early days, there were many fewer podcasts a decade ago, and you were posting on YouTube and things, and not a lot of people were doing that. The influencer was not really a thing as much a decade ago. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, and actually that's a great place to start for me. I actually started I started probably in 2005, 2006 with a blog, to go along with my boot camp that I started. And that quickly turned into Facebook and posting on Facebook. And back then, just so all the listeners sort of understand, back then it's interesting, right? Because everything I posted on Facebook got seen by the people who followed me. And so that I single-handedly built my first $1 million company called Metabolic Effect off of Facebook. And at that time, Facebook, if I posted, anyone who followed me would see it. And I built that up to about 100,000 plus individuals, that Facebook page. Now, I continued to do that. And by the way, this is a whole other thing that I'm kicking myself that I didn't start podcasting sooner, because podcasting started probably around, 2010, 2011, 2012, maybe a little bit later. I didn't really start podcasting, I think, until 2018, 2017, 2018, maybe as early as 2016. But this is another role, to take the risk and be the early adopter. And I'll talk about content this way. The reason that I do content is because I love to teach. And one of the things I know about you too, Michael, is we've got to know each other. You're an excellent teacher, and you also love to teach. And so one of the things that I didn't do content in the beginning to kind of be like, I'm going to do content. I did content in the beginning because I wanted to teach. I wanted to write books. I wanted to do these things, and I like to talk. I like to work my ideas out loud to people. I think that's one of the reasons you and I get along. Like, we're both people who like to, play with and debate and just try our ideas on with other people and to ourselves. And so content really was that for me. And it's really interesting because I'll tell you a little bit of what I'm running into now. We could talk about talking about some of the stuff you run into. One of the things that happened for me is because my business started with Metabolic Effect and then it went into Metabolic Doc. And then I started Next Level Human sort of as a side project almost a decade ago, but it wasn't a business yet. My content was kind of all over the place. And I started with I had a huge YouTube channel that built I don't know, several, thousands, 40, 30,000 people at the time, YouTube channel that was getting a lot of views, but it was all workouts, young men when I was training mixed martial artists and stuff like that. Then when I went to more of my expertise, which was female endocrine and menopausal stuff, I lost a lot of that engagement. And that situation has happened to me many times where I built up channels, switched sort of gears a little bit, switched business, and those channels have essentially died. And this has been a frustration because now when you're starting a new channel, it is really, really tough to get attention. Whereas back in the day, it would be like, well, I built up one channel and then I could move some of those channel over. So let's say I built up, 100,000 people on Facebook and then I started a new Facebook page. Maybe I took 50% of those people with me. Then I'd start another Facebook page. Maybe I take 20% of those people with me. And it has served me that Jade Teta has stayed pretty constant. There is a small amount of people who have followed me throughout my journey. But the point I'm making here is that when you're thinking about content and in a business, I think it's two things now where we are. And I think this is always possibly going to change. But I think when you think about content, the first question is, should I build it for my business or should I build it for my personal brand? And because I was doing this for businesses one after the other, I would lose a lot of that cred and credibility and a lot of that sort of trust that I built up with individuals when I went to a new company. One of the things I really think we have to be careful about is to make sure our personal brand is always up front, because that is the thing that will follow us around from business to business to business versus really focusing on our brand. And this does make it a little more difficult for us because it means we have to do something for our brand and we have to do something for our sort of personal brand, our business brand and our personal brand. And it makes it much more difficult. But I still think content is king. I think content will continue to be king. I think it is much different now. And we could talk about some of the lessons I've learned on what to do. But I also think that the personal brand is perhaps the thing that you want to lean into the most, because it is the thing that will follow you around when businesses change or fail, which oftentimes, more times than not, they will.
I've had a lot of conversations around it recently, and one of the guys I talked with last week, it's interesting you mentioned having a blog first, because he sort of had it's a graphic he sent me that's stair steps of a kind of complexity and different phases. And the first thing that he has, where a lot of people, especially if they don't say, "Oh, I'm not really a writer," right? And so he has newsletter blog first, and then podcast content second, and then compile that into a free tool or ebook, and then maybe that becomes a book. And I know you have several books, especially around metabolism, and then that you know assemble those into a course, right? And then some of this could be a keynote, and then a workshop, and everything's kind of building and expanding on, and then you have all these, and you put them all behind a paywall, and then you have this vault, so you have this course that people can pay for, and then coaching and then events, conference, mastermind retreat is at the end. And I was actually said to him last week, I want to do a retreat, and he's like, cool. Here's my model. He's like, start at the beginning. If you want to follow the phases, follow the steps, unless you already have a huge following, you can't just say, people don't know you. They, through all these things, there's the education piece and there's the personal brand piece. And so you're conveying content, but you're also conveying trust. And, do I like Jade? I like what he says, but do I like him? And then just yesterday I was on another call, and we were talking about who do you serve, right, is an important thing to be very clear on, and you already articulated that. And then the other two things that were mentioned or emphasized were, what are you for and what are you against? And then what is your unique advantage? advantage. And I wonder for you, I don't, I have someone exactly what you're for and what you're against and what your unique advantage is.
Yeah.
Could you articulate that?
Yeah, it's very simply the thread of everything I do is do what works for you. And so I am against cookbook tactics in health, in fitness, in diets, in personal development. So the thread that goes through the Jade Teta brand is find and do what works for you. There is only one rule in all of health and fitness and personal development, and that is do what works for you. And then that begs the question, well, how do I discover what works for me? And so that is the next piece. So my whole thing is to become a metabolic detective. This goes all the way back into, the ME brand. But of course, I am much more, and this is where things start to get confusing. I am much more than just metabolism. And in fact, now I am mostly psychology, next level human. And if you notice the difference between metabolic effect, metabolic.com, which was a joint venture, not mine, and Next Level Human. If we just focus on Metabolic Effect and Next Level Human, you'll see that sort of the process is built in. Metabolic Effect, ME, right? Do what works for me. It's kind of baked into the name. Also, Next Level Human, the idea is not better level human, next level human, getting to my next level. And so the brands that I even come up with have this baked in. Now, the truth of the matter is given my journey, and I've been thinking a lot about this, I've done a pretty atrocious job, a pretty bad job of people being able to spot that in me. Certainly, if they were, following all my metabolism stuff, they would see that thread. But it has not necessarily been the thing that people would say, oh, here's what Jade is about. And this, I think, is a cautionary tale, something that I'm still trying to figure out, is that many of us, me like you, Michael, right? Many of us and many of you listening to this are not one dimensional, and we do not like to be put into a one dimensional thing. And so we don't want to be put into this, sort of box. But I do think in business, in the beginning, we can be all the things, but all those things need to be discovered. And the one thing needs to be where people sort of find us. Now, I have made a choice, probably a destructive choice, not to do that with Next Level Human. The Next Level Human brand is basically 4 jobs: health and fitness, finance, personal relationships, and personal development. That makes it much more difficult for me. But if I was going to give myself advice and everyone else, I would say choose one of those, because that's basically 4 businesses in a row. I also want to say something about your friend, which I would love to talk to him. You and I both, we love debate and friendly debate, and I would agree and disagree with some of what he's saying. And here's why: because when you start with content alone, especially now, you're not going to get very far. It could take you 3 to 5 years, even a decade, to build up enough of this content vault to actually build business. So this idea of content to e-commerce or content to direct response is way too slow and makes you very little money from that perspective. So I like to do both and. I do not like this idea of a stepwise process where it's like first build up your content, then you go to the next thing, then you go to the next thing. From my perspective, I go, no, launch it now. And by the way, we all know that you're going to have to finance to get from 0 to 1. $0 to $1 million in your business. You're going to need to, a lot of us are going to need to finance that with a job, which means we will need to do one-on-ones. And from my perspective, even if you have 3 people in the room or 4 people in the room at a retreat, you should be doing them. And the reason why, in my mind, is that I see it as content on one end, retreats and one-on-ones on the other end. And then you fill in the gaps in the middle rather than trying to do this stepwise process, because otherwise you will not make money. Content does not pay like it used to. And so I do see this a lot where people have built up their vault and they go start here because that's what they did and it worked out for them. But I think what they're forgetting is they almost always had a job financing that. And so to me, I think it is much faster when you're building a business to go ahead and start the one-on-one consulting, sort of stuff, start the retreats right away, start making those things work. Partly because the marketing it's a huge lift And it is a huge amount of understanding that you need to understand. And the best way to understand is make the actions, make the choices, take the actions, right? It's like leap and do the thing. Otherwise, you build up the content. And by the way, I've been through this where I was just a content guy. And then I did not know how to market at all. And the reason I did not know how to market is because what I was doing is writing content, building programs, but not learning how to effectively sell those things because I wasn't doing sort of the high-end stuff. So I would say do the content for sure. Second, start doing the retreats and all those things and start filling in the gaps in the middle. To me, that would be my advice. Now, we all know we could have 10 different people, 10 business people who've done this. They're all going to have different answers. So I realize I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just giving all the listeners a different opinion here and trying to explain why I don't think it's a good idea to go this stepwise process, because I just don't think you're going to make it fast enough. Most people, you'll get burned out. And if you're going to do content, by the way, which we could talk about, AI is now making this pretty easy, but a lot of people aren't knowing how to do this. I'll just cover this briefly and we'll see if you want to continue to focus on this. But we now have the ability to write content much faster. The problem is that if you're just using straight AI, you're sounding like everyone else and it's pretty canned. So what you want to do is you want to learn how to use AI in a way that sounds like Michael or sounds like Jade. And this is where you begin to we can use ChatGPT because it is the most popular right now, but you can build your own bots. And what you can do is you can go in and construct a GPT and load up, for example, and this is what having a lot of content does for you. And what I would do if I were you, let's say, Michael, with your podcast, each podcast you load up, you take that transcript, you turn it into a PDF, you load it up into a GPT, and every time you do that, you load this up into a GPT. The same GPT, let's call it Michael Donovan's content bot. And you load up, and if you have a book, you load that up. And every time you do a blog, you load that up into this bot. And then when you get ready to write your emails, you can say to the prompt, you are an expert in email marketing and copywriting. Please use all the resources available to you in that I've given to you to create a blog, an email, whatever it is, based on these topics. And then you can outline the email very fast in your own language. And the other thing you want to put in this bot, by the way, is a brand voice document where you basically create a document that tells the GPT, this is how I sound. Here's how I want you to write. Here's the style. Here's the way you construct the blogs when I ask for a blog and all this stuff. And what you can do now is you can write emails daily and blogs daily almost, and pump these things out, and you get better and better at it. This is what I believe is for the people who are paying attention, content's becoming easier. But again, because it's becoming easier, there's more and more noise, and you're going to have to build this in a particular way. And I'll stop here, but when you do the content, in my mind, there's a very specific way to do this content that we can talk about that will actually make you money in the short run versus waiting.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot there to dive into. And I think when you were talking earlier about the three sort of pillars of diet, exercise, and psychology, and you chose fitness because that's where the tide was going, right? That's where the flow of people was. Sometimes you might choose the others because you could differentiate yourself better. And I think that just that choice, right, of which direction to go can kind of be applied to this as well. If everyone's doing this thing, then it's easy to get diluted. It's easy to get just, lost in the noise. So what are some things besides doing it better, right? Maybe doing something a little bit different that jumps out more and really has more of an impact than just doing the things that everyone else is doing. And maybe it is just doing it better, right? I mean, with any business, you do it first or you do it better than the existing. But, there's also those sort of complete game changers like the Netflix disrupting, the streaming industry and things
Yeah.
like that.
Well, let me cover a couple things. Just, I'm sure everyone knows this, but we'll cover a couple things here. In this industry of coaching, right? Like primarily coaching, there are four areas that make the most money. Ironically, they're the same four areas, perhaps not ironically by choice. They're the same four areas that Next Level Human covers. If you want to make money online with teaching, The first place to go, you're going to make the most money by teaching people how to make money. So finance, career. Then it's health and fitness, which, there's lots of things inside health and fitness. Then it's personal relationships. Then it's personal development. Personal development last. There are some people make a lot of money, Tony Robbins, stuff like that, but they're few and far between. The big ones are finance and health and fitness. Okay, so now you go, well, I'm a health and fitness guy. So take the other three away. Now you're sitting at health and fitness. Now inside health and fitness, there are many different ways to go. There's many different fitness genres, right? There's many different health conditions. And then, of course, there are many different demographics in there. So you can essentially say, I'm a fitness person for women with PCOS, right? And this is how you begin to niche down. So that's the first sort of piece. If you're just, hey, I'm a fitness person, now you're competing with everyone. And anyone who's ever read, one of the classic business books, Blue Ocean Strategy, the idea is that what you do is you go, don't go to the red ocean where everyone's doing fitness. Go to a blue ocean by doing something slightly different. So it's sort of red ocean adjacent, right? Where it's like it's sort of in fitness, but it's niche down a little bit. And that's sort of the old sort of model that everyone gets. And that still, I think, plays an important role. But at this point, there are many people in all of these oceans. And the more the other problem is that the more you dilute down, the less people are there, right? Like, for example, you wouldn't want to be someone who does fitness for PCOS women who also do croquet, right? It's not, there's no money there. So at some point, you have to stop. And at that point, then it becomes a value issue, right? So when you talk about do it better, do it faster, or whatever, it really comes down to a value proposition for the person. It basically is like, hey, what am I getting? What is the sort of end result, this goal that I really want, right? And do I believe this person can deliver it? And how long is it going to take? Right. And how much am I going to have to give up to do it? It's these four things, right? This is the value. And actually, Alex Hormozy, I think, does a really good job. He has a different way of explaining it, but he talks about value in this way. I think he has a value equation that essentially hits these areas, right? But it's basically like, can you articulate the big sort of dream that people want, and the idea of the outcome of what they want? And is it going to be something that they believe they can achieve? And is it going to be something that doesn't take too many resources and risks in terms of money and time and effort? And so from my perspective, what a lot of people do in business is they go, okay, let me niche down, right, to this, sort of area. Whole situation stops there. Once you niche down, then you have to look around your periphery and say, okay, who's here? And what kind of value are they actually offering people? And what now can I do? Now, people also make mistakes here because what they also do is they go, I'll just add more features, right? So this person gives 5 workouts a week, I'll give 10. That's not value necessarily, right? That takes more time. So a lot of people might want to go, hey, I would rather have the 5 workouts than the 10 workouts. So it's not a whole thing about adding features. This is another mistake that a lot of business people make. It's about, how do I give results? I'll give you an idea from my new business, Next Level Human. So from my perspective, from a business point of view, and I like to look at it from both ends. I go, how do I give value to the client? And how do I value my time, get the most out of my time? So from my perspective, there's 2 ways to do, let's say, the Next Level Human coaching that I'm building, right? There's 2 ways to do it. One, I could go, well, I'll do one-on-ones. They could sit here with me for an hour and talk to me. The truth of the matter, though, is if I was going to give them optimal value in that hour, I would probably be doing things like breath work with them, journaling work with them, other things that I know are super powerful that then I can do my work with. And a lot of people do this. Like, chiropractors might, ice pack and a TENS unit on you before they adjust you because they know that this is going to help the value of the actual adjustment versus just adjusting you. Maybe they could give more value by saying, hey, let's give you a massage first and some stretching first. Let's then put the hot pack on you. Let's then do the TENS unit, and then I'll adjust you. And they get more value. So how do we as coaches do that? And how do we also maximize our time, right? If the chiropractor has a tech that can put you in all these things, then he only needs to come in and adjust you for 10 minutes. You actually feel like you got way more because you were there getting all these things, but he did way less. He gave you way more value at way less. So I think one of the things that's missing in some of these value talks is that, yes, give the client optimal value, but make sure you are also giving yourself optimal time and value for your time. So one of the things I am doing, rather than giving one-on-ones with me, is I'm building into this that when you come in and have a session, it's more like a class. And I have multiple people come into this class, and we do a specific type of breath work that I developed. And we'll talk about, you have to build your proprietary things that so they distinguish yourself. A certain type of breath work that I developed, a certain type of journaling technique that I developed. Right now, this is the skill set, right? You got to have the background to do these things, but these are proprietary. And then a particular type of coaching that comes on the back end of that I developed. And I basically get to serve 50 people in an hour, and they get more value from that class, way more value. It blows me away what happens in some of these sessions than me working with them one-on-one. And so when we look at this, that's how I would be thinking about this blue ocean strategy. It's like, it's not just get to the blue ocean, but go to a new depth, give incredible value. Also, though, paying attention to how much time you're giving, because what people want to do is they think value is just another feature. I'll give more workouts, I'll give more of my time. And then next thing you know, they can't deliver on that. The value sucks because it's just a bunch of stuff, scattershot everywhere, and the client is not getting results. And so you want to think about, what is the maximum amount of value I can truly deliver without giving up all my time. Once you do that, now I believe you have your offer. And then the next stage is you got to know how to market that. Now, building a program and an offer, and then the marketing, right? So I just talked a little bit about the program and the offer, and now we have to do the marketing. And just so everyone's following discussion, the first part of this, when we're talking about content, this is sort of attraction stuff. After that, you need like gravity, right? And what I mean is, if we think about the funnel, right? It's people coming into a funnel. You have to attract them, kind of like chumming the water, like you're attracting the sharks. But then you need gravity to pull people into your system. And this is where they're going to know, like, and trust you, where they actually are getting, wow, Michael gives really good stuff all of the time. He kind of gives away the farm. But then you get into his services, and it's even better. And that is how you need to think about this, because I think a lot of times people in business, they're thinking about, what are all the things that I can give, instead of thinking, what value can I uniquely deliver? How can I do it while freeing up more of my time? And that is something you should be thinking about day and night, every second. And when you get that right, I do think you've got at least maybe 30% of it. And I do think the rest of the 60% is pure marketing.
Yeah, I love the proprietary aspect of it that sometimes gets overlooked, and maybe especially when you're just starting out, and maybe it's someone that doesn't have the educational or experience that we have, and they don't have a lot. They maybe they're not sure the value they bring, right? But creating, I remember listening to Brendan Burchard talking about creating his own lexicon, and I know you've done that a bit through all your books, right? You create something, and your followers and the people who read your book know exactly what that means, and you can use that in content, and people, it creates curiosity, because people are like, oh, I'm not familiar with that term. What does that mean? Do you think that's powerful as well?
I think it's extremely powerful. And I'll give people an example just so they can understand what they're talking about. So in Next Level Human, one of the major things that I have come to discover through my work and my education, and just because I'm a clinician and what works, is I discovered that limiting beliefs, everyone's heard that term, and childhood development and adolescent development are a huge factor in why people have limiting beliefs. Now, I could certainly go out and start talking about limiting beliefs. However, that doesn't get anyone's attention. So what I do is I turn around and say, you've got mud. What is mud? Mud is misguided, unconscious decisions. That's just limiting beliefs, but I'm packaging it differently. And then I tell a story about it. You've got mud, these misguided, unconscious decisions. Misguided because they are formed at a time where you didn't have the knowledge, the know-how, the wisdom, the tools, or the understanding to make sense of them. They're unconscious because they follow you around like a shadow. And they're decisions because, whether you believe it, realize it or not, you did at some point make a choice and made that mean something. So someone might say, well, Jade, isn't that just limiting beliefs? Yes, it is. But it's also mud, and it tells a better story than saying limiting beliefs. And so I do think, as you're marketing and building your content, which that's the beginning of your marketing, you want to begin to develop a vocabulary like this and tell stories. And some of the easiest ways to tell stories are through analogies, metaphors, frameworks, and those kinds of things. I think this is critical. And again, something that people miss. And I know it's getting complicated. And I know people are like, well, they all oftentimes say, Jade, you think in frameworks and analogies and metaphors. Well, that's because I've been doing it since 2004. Right. It's taken a long time to get there, but I do think that's how you do it. When, people know a lot about story marketing, what they don't realize is that the simplest way to tell a story is through a analogy, a metaphor, or a framework. And then, of course, yes, emotional stories and the hero's journey. If you can build all that into your marketing, great. But absolutely, you build the vocabulary.
And I think what's interesting, I remember when we were together a few months ago, we were talking about some of this kind of stuff. We were talking about quizzes as a lead magnet. And let's take just a random example, just off the top of my head, of like, are you a shark, a turtle, or a bear, or something like that, right? And then you take the quiz and you're like, oh, I'm a shark. And basically, there's no difference between the shark, the turtle, and the bear. You just place yourself in a box, and then you say, as you know, these three pillars, we're emphasizing certain ones or highlighting certain ones, but these are the three pillars: diet, exercise, and mindset kind of thing of every fitness program since the beginning of fitness programming time, right? It's just how the elements of those and the features of those kind of are highlighted in different ways or emphasized. But ultimately, there's not a lot of new. We're not going to come up with new stuff to incorporate into these. It's just, and it's not just packaging. I mean, we are putting our spin on it and our unique layering of different things. And a lot of how you put something together is important. The same elements put together in different ways creates something that can be effective for someone versus something that's not going to be effective. But I think the other aspect that I also want to emphasize is what's not included. And sometimes that gets overlooked, but I'm sure there's things that, whether you're completely categorically against it or it's just not something that, you incorporate, but there are things that in order to emphasize the pillars, now you have 4 pillars in Next Level Human. There are a lot of things you might have considered including and said, no, that's not really going to enhance the new brand as we go forward.
Yeah, and I think this is such a great discussion. I certainly in my career have done this really well. It served me, but you also, in my mind, have to understand it's not just gimmick, right? We now know that expectation effect, which is essentially the placebo effect applied to marketing, matters and matters a lot. So if you have a thing where like, hey, you're a shark, you're a turtle, or you're a bear, what this does is it creates an expectation effect that makes this person buy in more. And whether or not you give them all the exact same program, just the idea that you individualize this to some degree gives them a little bit more buy-in, which is going to affect their outcome. And I think health and fitness professionals miss this. We get in arguments. For example, me and Lane Norton, got in a big argument about this, a while back about the idea of hormone types and female hormone types. So the idea here is if I tell someone, hey, you've got these hormones and let me just give you a plan, I'm going to get better results from people if I can essentially say, hey, look, there are women who are menopausal who are dealing with slightly different things than women who are, younger women who are menstruating. And by the way, there's a different hormonal situation if you're pregnant. And what that does is 2 things. Number one, there really is different outcomes, regardless of, what people will say, from a menopausal woman versus a perimenopausal woman versus a young premenstrual or a premenopausal woman. But also, so there are real plans, little tweaks that we can adjust based on those. But perhaps more importantly, when someone is given a type like this, there is more buy-in. And when there is more buy-in, you get better results. And the whole entire health and fitness industry, because they're not psychology people, completely miss this. And by the way, I think it's one of the reasons most health and fitness people get terrible results. I honestly believe that by giving any quiz, I don't care if it is, you're the turtle, you're the bear, or you're the whatever, any type of thing that you can do to stratify people is going to help them. And by the way, I'll give you a less gimmicky way to do it. Just do assessments. In other words, when someone comes in, if they believe that you're looking at this assessment and paying attention to them as an individual, you will have more buy-in. And you don't even need to, if you're one of these people, it's like, I don't like that style of marketing where I'm going to, give people types or whatever. And a lot of times, I would say don't do that if you're not truly individualizing things. I truly individualize my approach for people based on their physiology, their psychology, their preferences, and their practical circumstances. So everything I do truly individualizes things that way, and my quizzes are built around that. But to just take, advantage of this marketing placebo effect, all you really need to do is assessments. And so, for example, let's say I send out my daily email, and in that email, let's say I'm talking about blood sugar responses. And in that effect, I basically say, hey, there's different types of people. We know through, let's say, putting a CGM on somebody that if we all take a piece of white bread, not everyone's going to get a big glucose excursion. In fact, some people's glucose is going to be completely normal and their hunger is going to be great. And if you're one of these people, we're going to call you a blah, blah, blah sugar type. And if you're one of these people who gets, these big insulin excursions, we're going to call you a blah, blah, blah type. And by the way, here's some of the signs and symptoms. If you're the person who gets these big glucose excursions, maybe you get tired, maybe you put on fat easily, etc. Take this, by the way, P.S., if you're interested in this, take this brief 3-question assessment that will determine how you handle glucose. Now, whether you do anything with that or not, what you have done is just give this person more value simply because you have put in their mind of paying attention to their individual responses. And what happens is, from my perspective, psychologically, when they take that step, they start to see themselves differently. I am somebody who actually is interested in my food responses. Next thing you know, you can push based on that assessment. You then can have a glucose program. And again, it could basically be like, hey, you who took the assessment and scored as someone who has normal glucose, this is a good approach for you. You might be able to get away with a little bit more carbohydrates versus this other person. And from my perspective, this is common sense applied to marketing using the placebo expectation effect. And by the way, we know this works. There's, like for those of you who are science guys, because you and I are, science guys, there's that famous milkshake study by Alina Crum, who she basically took chocolate milkshakes. It was the same milkshake. She just didn't tell the subjects that. One chocolate milkshake was labeled decadent, high calorie milkshake. The other chocolate milkshake was measured diet slimming milkshake. They measured their ghrelin levels before and after, their cortisol levels before and after, and their subjective hunger before and after. Well, guess what happened? The people who thought they were getting the high calorie decadent milkshake had lower ghrelin levels and higher cortisol levels and lower hunger than the people who didn't, who had higher ghrelin levels, and the exact opposite. And this blows people away, but we now know a little bit how this works in the brain. Actually, there was a study that came out several weeks back looking at we're starting to figure out what is happening in the brain with the placebo effect. By the way, we all know the placebo effect is the most powerful thing in all of medicine. We can't even do any studies without accounting for the placebo effect. And so, talking about business, I think we can use this placebo effect, this expectation effect, marketing expectation effect to our advantage, if that makes sense.
Totally. So I want to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about the podcast, how to, you leverage a podcast, monetize a podcast, these kinds of things. And also just advice for, I know a lot of people in my space who are starting out for their first business. Maybe they've been doing a typical W2 career for a long time and they want to break out on their own and build a personal training business or build a personal brand. And with no previous experience, no prior experience, they have the expertise, they have the credentials, they have what it takes to run the business from a business standpoint and from a coaching standpoint, but they have zero clients right now. In that first, and there's just so many different avenues that, and I just listed a whole stair step thing, right? And you don't necessarily agree with that exact process, but what would you say that, just kind of without any other specific details? And it wouldn't even necessarily have to be in the health and fitness space. It could be in any of the other pillars, right? It could be personal development, but someone that's kind of doing coaching, consulting, maybe group stuff, maybe wants to do retreats and things like that. How do you get started and some of this may be influenced by the algorithms currently, right? And so as we record this in August of 2024, maybe someone listening to this a year from now the advice could be completely different because YouTube or Facebook or whatever, Instagram has changed their algorithms.
Well, when you're first starting your business, the old school stuff matters, right? So let's say you have zero anything. You've been in the work world for a long time. You feel like you have the expertise, but you got zero clients, nothing. First thing that you do is you go into your contacts on your phone, you go on your friends and social media, and you basically announce what you are doing. And you start dealing with people there. Ask them to spread this stuff around. That's the first thing that you do. What I would probably do is also just starting out because you want to start making money is I would do something like, let's say you're a personal trainer, you have a training system. I would take 10, 20 people, tell them you're doing a free 3-month program, free. You need some beta testers, and ask all your friends. Some of these people will be your mom, your friends. Like, get as many people into this thing as you can. You're going to give it to them for free. All you want is a before sort of thing and an after thing. That's the only sort of exchange that is happening. And you run this program, and then you begin to upsell your services after that. At that point, from my perspective, you have to have one-on-one clients. And I would be doing an event right away, actually. I would try to get as many people, even if it's 3 people, into an event. And it may have to be a free event. And again, it's coming from this initial pool of people that know you. Now, adjacent to that, you begin your podcast immediately. And the idea behind a podcast at this point is a lot of people will go in and say, I'm passionate about certain ideas. I want to talk about my ideas. In the beginning, I would say you want to put out, before you even launch your podcast, you probably should shoot 10 or 20 of them just so you have a head start. And the other thing that you want to do is, I would say 5 of these podcasts are for the client. 1 of them is for you. Most people do this wrong. They do all of the stuff based on what they're interested in. The next thing you want to do is those same group of people, you want to ask them what they're interested in, especially the people who are like, going to come in. You want to say, talk to them and do interviews with them, and, an entrance interview and an exit interview. You want to go on Google and see what people are searching. And these should be the topics of your podcast, the things that people are interested in. And this is relatively easy to do now because all you have to do is, if you're going to be surfing through scrolling and through social media anyway, find and look at the things that are getting a lot of action. Oh my gosh, someone, this has got 100,000 likes or whatever. I'm going to do a podcast on this, right? I keep a list in my social media of clips to duplicate, ideas to do that I see good stuff, but it's based on, does it interest me? No, it's not based on that. It's like, do I think this is popular? So it might interest me, but then I go, is it also popular? And I start building my content there. Then I do my podcast, and you do it in a way like you and I use Riverside. The reason why you use a system like that it's good to invest in, is because it generates a lot of content for you. It's got an AI system in the back end. It does all the notes for you. It gives you clips. And of course, then you can distribute all that stuff. So from my perspective, that's how you start. You get your small little group of people, you do that thing for free. And I think everyone now, this might change, but to me, I'm like, do a YouTube channel and or a podcast, and do this long form content that you could chunk down into short form content. So to me, YouTube and podcast are the way to go. Now, a lot of people just do, hey, the podcast, I'll put that on YouTube, but build these channels up. I also would say Substack is probably a great place to also post your blog. And the reason I like YouTube and Substack is because you get more of the people who follow you at these places are going to, you own them more than you do in these other social media channels that we're using. So then you distribute onto TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. And to me, this is the approach you use. And then you really tweak and look at, and a lot of people don't like this, but you need pithy, clickbaity type of stuff. This is the stuff that gets attention. And as much as we might hate it, it is the stuff that we need to be paying attention to. Now, certainly I would say, if, being the next level human or trying to be a next level human, we should do this in a way that is not like, like I just saw a thing that Donald Trump put out that's like, Harris is going to destroy the human race. And, of course, then Harris is putting out stuff like Donald Trump's going to destroy the human race. We don't need clickbaity stuff like that, but we do need stuff that's going to get people's attention. By the way, the reason why that stuff doesn't work is because we all know now that every Democrat is going to say that every Republican's a fascist and every Republican is going to say every Democrat's a socialist. It's old stuff now, and you lose credibility in that. So don't make the mistakes of what's happening in politics and the politicians, but do create clickbaity stuff that gives value, right? Like, for example, if I'm going to do a post on, let's say, GLP-1s and Ozempic and weight loss, right? I don't want to put like, Ozempic will kill you, or Ozempic is the golden child. I want to say something like, bet you didn't know these 3 things about the new miracle weight loss drugs, right? Because it frames a question. So you just go, what are the 3 things? Or don't take Ozempic until you know these 2 things, right? It's like leaving this sort of thing. And if you give good value in that, it even builds more gravity, because people are like, it's not clickbait if it is amazing content. It's only clickbait is if the title gets you and there's nothing there. That's why we get mad at that stuff, because we go, that title got me and then there was nothing there. So to me, I go clickbait all day long and then go give massive value. It's no longer clickbait, right? It's click love, right? It's click addiction. It's like, I want, every time Michael posts something or Jade posts something, I want to get in there. So we do have to pay attention to that. A lot of us are failing, I think, is because we have these belief systems. And this goes back to the next level human philosophy, right? We have these belief systems that I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be different than that. And I think that's great, right? Take all that in, because that's what makes your business unique. But I would say the better approach is, I am going to use the same tactics that work, but I'm going to give massive value inside of it. The reason why we get mad at these tactics is because there's not value behind them. No one is going to get mad at you for doing, a title like that if there's massive value in it. And that's how I would do it. So then every podcast you put out becomes a bunch of content. Every YouTube, long form YouTube video you put out becomes a bunch of content. Every, sort of blog you put out can be put in multiple places. And that way you're really only putting out a few, big pieces of content, and the rest of it is editing. Unfortunately, if you're just starting out, you're going to have to do that. And we're going to have to become experts at content. We have to also remember content nowadays, like, you better be coming with the first 3 seconds being amazing. And I'll admit, I'm horrible at this. I'm just trying to learn. I like to just get on and talk. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This, and everyone's already gone. Right. And so we all have to get better at this sort of approach. But that's how I would be looking at this.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, as soon as possible, my goal is to hire a team for these kinds of things, and whether it's virtual assistants or, social media expert, so I can really focus on what I enjoy doing, and that's having conversations and not to the behind the scenes editing. And as you said, platforms like this, I'm sure there's many other competitors that also have great AI tools built into them that it does a pretty good job. But I also have high standards for what I want it all to look like. We were talking earlier about, we've been talking a lot about kind of solopreneur companies, and I'm curious about 2 kind of directions. One of your businesses, you said you had business partners, and I don't want to say that that was the only reason that business failed, but a lot of times I know so unfortunately so many friends and colleagues who have been in disputes for years, after, because, things went sideways, and, fingers were pointed, and it's such a shame to put on all that effort and skill and then things to crumble. The question I asked earlier was about someone just starting out. And when you're at that stage, are you thinking of a truly scalable business, like exponentially scalable? And it's hard when you're making $0 to think, in a few years, and hopefully it's a reasonable amount of time, not like next year I'm going to have a $10 million company, right? But like in a reasonable time frame, versus an incremental sort of more lifestyle business that could make $500,000 a year, and you could do, it could be a very, very successful lifestyle business. I think for me, there's a difference in just the initial approach, just the whole mindset of going into something thinking exponential versus incremental. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think, like, here's the thing. First of all, there's another very popular business book called The E-Myths that, people should know. And this book, the general gist of it is that most people go into businesses and they don't build businesses, they have jobs. So they go from one job to another job. Let's say they're a personal trainer and then they want to open up their own gym and they think they're starting a business. And now what happened is they just became the accountant, the gym manager. They're still training. They're doing all the things. And this is why they don't make money and why businesses collapse, because they go from one job to 10 jobs, not a business. So from that perspective, you always want to think about scaling to some degree. The second part of this, though, is I think that for most of us, the goal is the time millionaire. Actually, I had a brand early on called Time Millionaire. Still have that domain, and that was a separate business, and I had to focus on metabolic effect. But the Time Millionaire is just someone who basically lives like a millionaire because they're in charge of their time. And from my perspective, this is the guy or girl you're talking about who's like, you know what, I'm just building my own little brand-based business. I'm making $100, $200, $300,000 a year, and I get to work whenever I want, and I love what I do, and it's amazing. And from my perspective, almost anyone can do that if they have, sort of the expertise and the knowledge and are willing to put in the work. That being said, I still think you have to be ready to understand, to build systems and to be able to scale. Now, let's talk about the person who is going to scale, who wants to scale. I've gotten to the point, because this is my, sort of third time at it, watching it. And really, I've started several other businesses that I shut down pretty quickly. So it's probably my, doing it. But from my perspective, you should start with scaling in mind. And the reason why is because a business that is planned to scale properly is going to be a business that will last regardless. And what you want to do is you want to eventually either retire or you want to sell it. In order to do really either of those, you're going to want to try to scale your business. And I'll give you an example with Next Level Human. So one of the things that I'm doing, the simplest way to think about scaling is to go, what is it that I am doing? So that whole idea of what is the value I'm bringing to the client and how am I valuing my own time? That's the first step, I think, in scaling. And then the next thing in scaling is to say, how do I duplicate this value and free up even more time, where I'm not doing anything? And that's the way I think about it. So for me, and you have to do this within your skill set. So within my skill set, I am a CEU provider for health and fitness practitioners. I've done certified people in health and fitness programs, and I've certified trainers. I've certified multiple types of health and fitness professionals in, for example, female endocrinology, for example, in rest-based training, which is a system of training I developed back 20 years ago. What I want to do is I build my system, and to me, I teach other people to deliver this. And then I essentially look at it like, how do I recreate Jade? Or how do you create Michael? Or how do you, the listener, recreate yourself? And this is where systems come in. And so the easiest way to do this is start to build those systems for yourself now, knowing that these systems can easily be duplicated and used for individuals later. So what I'm doing right now is I am training a group of health professionals in my proprietary method, my BEEP breath work, breath enhanced emotional processing. Notice the acronym again, right? It's like breath work done in a particular way. My written exposure therapy, it's a wet therapy that is essentially something that I've taken and made my own. I'm certifying them in these ideas of quantum metabolism so they can sort of understand. Notice another sort of term that, gets people's eyebrows up, right? And so now I can essentially go, rather than me delivering these coaching classes, I've got these instructors. And by the way, as they come in, as you build this, they're paying me to get certified, and I may bring them into the business. So this is the way I'm doing, but the simplest way to do it for individuals is simply just to start, how do I build systems for myself to make me more efficient and get those systems more and more and more and more efficient, and then replace yourself. Just a brief example, because I know some of what you're doing, Michael. Let's say you're doing, teaching people to run particular races. Let's just say, someone's first 5K or someone's first adventure race, or, an elite athlete, getting people from, sort of the, regular athlete to, the elite athlete. And you have this particular coaching program and you're running this yourself. Now, the idea is to basically go, what is it that I'm doing? I can't just do this off the top of my head, because a lot of us will, right? We can do it off the top of our head. It's us, we do it intuitively. If you want to scale your business, you have to force yourself to essentially say, what is it that I do at this stage, this stage, this stage, and this stage? Let me write it out. Let me document it. What do these classes actually look like? Then you either automate the thing with the tech that we have through apps, and all the different stuff that we now have makes it very easy to automate, and that's how you scale. And or you train other professionals to deliver this. Like, one of the easiest ways to scale is, hey, I'm just going to automate the whole thing, and then I'll be VIP available for people on the high end, and I could choose what I need to do. But I would always say build to scale, because if you don't, what will happen is the businesses that are built to scale are the best businesses anyway. They're the ones that you can retire from. And you may decide you never want to retire from the business, but you also may decide you want to sell it. And that's an option you should be able to have. And of course, none of us have ever learned how to build a business to scale, myself included. And so, of course, I have been learning from other people who you all have heard of, and educating myself ever since my other business collapsed. So for the last year, one of the first things I did is I'm going to learn everything that I didn't know about business. Now, of course, there's still way, 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 way more stuff I don't know about business, but at least now I'm thinking in terms of scale, because when I'm thinking in terms of scale, what it does when you build a business that way, they're far less likely to collapse. When you're building to scale, you're always freeing up more and more time, becoming a time millionaire regardless. When you're building for scale, you also have more options. Yes, I can retire. Yes, I can just stay in the business. Ooh, I can sell it as well. To me, there's no other. Why else do it? Otherwise, you're just doing a job. And I think you should always be building for scale. But of course, again, I don't know that I'm right about that. It's my opinion, and a lot of people may disagree with that.
Sure. What are some of those resources that you've uh, really found beneficial over the last year or two?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've been doing is I've been finding the best people at certain things that I know that I need, and I'm just going directly to the source. So I ask around and I say, hey, who's the best at scaling? And I get a recommendation for, let's say, Alex Hormozy's scaling workshop, where I say, hey, who's the best at Facebook ads? And I get a recommendation for someone. And whenever I can, I just hire those people outright, because I've learned. Now, it's painful right now because I'm not making any income from my business. But I also know that paying someone $1,000 an hour to teach me everything they know about YouTube, for example, is way better time-wise and education-wise than me paying for a $30 YouTube product that I will never use or doesn't have that much value. And so that's essentially, sort of what I am doing. One of the people that I'm very interested in right now, for whatever reason, a very popular person that many of you will know, is Alex Hormozy. So I go through different stages. I just got introduced to him. That's why I think a lot of people have known him for a long time. I had no idea who that was, even though I was in the gym business, way back when. I think I was just a little bit ahead of him. But, from my perspective, I see him and I go, okay, this is a guy that's given a lot of great value as I'm looking at his stuff. Let me see what he's got. And so I went to his scaling workshop. I've been working with someone to teach me YouTube. I've been working with someone to teach me Facebook ads. Now, granted, we all are different in our risk and the money that we want to spend and can spend. But that's the other thing I'll say here, right? It's like in business, it's not leap and the net will appear. It's like leap and weave the net as you fall. If you're not willing to spend money and take risks like this, then it's going to be very difficult in my mind to grow. But there's also another side to this, because I am someone who tends to be very like I take a lot of risk, and I'll spend a lot of money, even going in debt on credit card. It makes a lot of people who are not that way, right? Because we're all different, very sick. They're like, what are you doing, man? Like, you're going to lose your house, like what are you? And I'm just like, I'm used to risk that way. Now, for people like me, they need to buckle down and make some money first so that they can pay for things. However, the people who are real tight, they need to be a little bit more like me. So I do think this is a back and forth, with things. Some people are more, and I would say people coming out of the corporate world are much more averse. They're not used to taking risk. I've been a risk taker since I was 18. So it just comes more natural to me. Big risk, big reward. So, we'll see. It's like, what happened to Jade? Oh, he's lost his house now. Oh, he's got it back now. Like, not a lot of people can, not a lot of people can stomach that. But I do think you have to, put in, the time to learn these things that you don't know. I don't think it's going to happen otherwise. And everyone's, a little bit different in that.
Yeah. You really emphasize the need for systems and automation. And I think the other thing that's really important that we haven't touched on is that the adage of what gets measured gets improved, right? And we haven't really talked about metrics. And so like, how do you know whether we talked about assessing on the individual level if you're actually coaching, but from a business standpoint, what metrics do you measure?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and this is something that's really interesting, right? Because this is something every business I've ever run, I've just done it by the seat of my pants. That's a bad idea, right? And so ultimately, what you want to be looking at is you want to be looking at how much revenue am I making, right? That's the big thing. How much am I bringing in? But that tells you just a little bit because it doesn't tell you necessarily what's going out. So on a high level, first you want to be like revenue expenses, like just like we would with our personal finances. Although if you're me, you also most of your life had not paid much attention to that either, right? It's just like, just go, right? Just make a bunch of money and I'll figure it out. But you don't want to do that in business. So first it's revenue versus expenses. And then it comes down to the metrics, that terminology that everyone I think in business needs to understand, like LTV, long-term value of a customer, and understanding what we mean by value. This isn't gross, what you make off of a client. It's net what you make off of a client, right? So it's the value that the client provides without you spending sort of money on this, right? So in the traditional world, this would be the cost of what I sold the product for, but then I have the cost that it took me to get the product, right? So it's like I sell this supplement for $12, but it cost me $6, $7 to make. The LTV in a service industry is essentially that same thing. It's basically, what did that client pay me to do this coaching? And what did it cost me to deliver that, right? Once you get that, then you have to essentially say, what is the value of that client versus how much did it cost me to acquire that client? So now it's this LTV versus what they call CAC ratio, cost of acquisition for that client. And that right there is the major engine that you need to look at. How much money am I making off each person? And how much money is it costing me to get each person? Now, I'll say it one more time because everyone misses this, right? It's like the LTV, long-term value of a customer, is what they pay you minus what it takes to fulfill on that service. The LTV to CAC ratio is the long-term value of that person minus the cost to acquire that person. And that LTV to CAC is basically the engine of the company. And that needs to be, a lot of people would say, it needs to at least be 3-1, preferably like 10-1. Otherwise, you don't really have a business. Now, if all that is too complex for someone, I'll tell you just a much easier way to think about this that will solve a lot of people's problem. From my perspective, just go back and look at what did I make in January and go, how much profit do I want in my business? And just pull out, I made $100,000 in January, let's say, and I want 10% profit. So that means at the end of January and at the beginning of February, you pull out 10%, right? You pull out $10,000 and you put that aside in an account, and you do the next thing the next month, and the next thing the next month. And then what happens is you don't spend anything on anything until you go into this quote profit account and you look. And then what happens at the end of the year, you can basically say whatever's in that profit account, you can take 50%. By the way, there's a whole book written on this by a guy named Alowicz, I think his name. The book is called Profit First. But it's just a simple way to think about this. And at the end of the year or the end of the quarter, you pay yourself 50% as a bonus, or you get the tool or the technique or buy whatever it is you need to buy from that money, and the rest stays in there and accumulates for the next year, and then or for the next months. And then at the end of the year, of course, you zero that out for taxes. So I'll say it again, quarterly, right? You basically say, how much is in this account? I'll take 50% as a distribution and or to buy things. And then at the end of the year, whatever's in there, I zero that out, buying equipment, paying myself a bonus or whatever. This is another very simple way to just realize that I have to have a business that is profitable. And if you can't make a business work when you're pulling out that 10% all the time, you are not running a healthy business. So either one of those, the LTV versus CAC ratio is really the way, to measure how effective you're being. But this profit first model is also a more simple way, I suppose, a gross way to know that, well, I'm actually making profit in my business. And the other thing is it forces you to manage your money better, right? Like I'm a type of dude that I don't know how all of you all are, but I'm the kind of guy, if the money's in the account, I spend it on something. I will find something to spend it on. And that's just a psychological thing that happens with Jay. So I have to protect myself from that. So my personal assistant, who's also my sister, luckily enough, she knows me. She pulls that money out because she knows I will find something to spend that money on. I'll find some new tech gadget that we need in the business or whatever if it's sitting there. Otherwise, if it's not there, I budget. And so again, psychologically, you could tell someone to budget all day long, but they're not going to do it unless they're forced to do it. So you build things in your systems that work with the way you are. Like, I don't know how you are, Michael. I imagine you're the opposite of me, right? You probably budget, budget, budget. I spend anything that's there, I spend. Other people are like, I don't spend anything. I have to work on spending. So you have to work within your psychology. And as you can tell, like everything I do is about understanding how people do things, not what they should do. That's a whole, that's a whole other business model. I'm like, it's not what people do, it's how people do it. So every business I've ever built is built around how people do things. And that's how I build value in my businesses. Because I'm not like telling you, follow this diet. I'm telling you, hey, I see the way you are. I built a system for you. Hey, I see the way you are. Here's a system for you. And so it's just another sort of way to do this. In your business, I say, understand who it is you are, what drives your psychological levers, and build your systems around that.
Beautiful. I think in the remaining time, I just want to pivot back to social media and content creation and the behind the scenes, the metric side of that and the analytics. And I think a lot of people get stuck on how many followers and subscribers and, maybe even boast that, I have these many, but quality versus quantity again, how many of those are engaged? When we talk about generating leads, are they engaged leads? Are they qualified leads? Or are they just leads, right? And there's a big difference. It's an important distinction. So if you had, for example, 1,000, the 1,000 true followers model that Kevin Kelly, maybe you don't even need that depending on the business, maybe just 100. If you had 100 people that were truly engaging in your content all the time, that's better than 100,000 that aren't really, in my opinion. And I wonder your take on that and how you do actually generate quality engagement with your social stuff.
Well, I'll give you a story to drive this home, right? So, like, my ex-girlfriend, her name's Nicole Spencer. She's a coach in this space. When I first met her, she was just starting her business called Authentic Conversion. She just sold that business recently. At that time, I had probably over 200, 300,000 followers across social media. She essentially had none. We were talking about money at one of our first dates, and she was like, "Oh my God, I would kill to make that amount of money." Over the next couple of years, I saw her without any social media following build $1 million business, a $3 million business, a $6 million business. Meanwhile, right, I was inside of a business with individuals and had all these social media followers. And as I've come out of that, I'm remembering her now because over 10 years, I did not really do much with this following that I had. They have become essentially a silent following. They are not engaged. The engagement is really low. And no matter what my following count is, I am not able to pull much out of them. Meanwhile, she built a $6 million business without much social media. She did it all through, live webinars, ads, through Facebook, and all the other things. The whole point here is that the following count, if it's not engaged, doesn't matter anymore. Certainly it provides social proof. So what? Jade's got, whatever it is, 130,000 followers on Instagram. Ooh, big whoop. Ultimately, does that pulling money out? Now, we all sort of have the high school effect. So we look at those followers and go, oh, Jade's got a lot of followers. In the end, though, those followers need to be converted into buyers. And here's what we now know. And actually, Gary Vaynerchuk's new book does a great job discussing this. He calls it, and by the way, he's amazing at everything he does, right? So like, him and Alex Hormozi and others are just really great for all of us, but he calls it the TikTokification of social media. What TikTok did that was different was, versus all the other social media platforms, TikTok said, okay, you follow Jade Teta and Michael Donovan, you follow both of them, so you must be interested in health and fitness content. I'm going to show you the best health and fitness content. right? So it focused on interest driven stuff. So it's not, so that you saw a little bit of me and you, but you just got really great health and fitness stuff. That wasn't the case with Facebook and Instagram and these other ones. What they were doing is they were saying, okay, well, you follow Jade Teta and Michael Donovan. We're going to show you more of their stuff and then some other stuff that you like. Well, every single social media company now is moving towards this interest-based algorithm, which means whoever's doing it best gets the eyeballs, right? So that means if you're doing it best, it doesn't matter that I have 128,000 followers on Instagram and you've got 500. If you're doing the content the best, you're going to grow faster. You're going to make more business out of that. So it turns it. And by the way, this is a good thing, even though it's not great for someone like me, right? It's better across in the long run. It's better for all of us because I'll get better at doing content, and it democratizes this whole situation. So it is a very good time, I would say, for people who don't have social media followings to begin this process, because you don't need to have all the, yes, the social proof is still a thing and it always will be a thing. But, let's be honest, like there was a time there where I was running contests through my social media. I was part of another business. I was playing around with my social media handles. That hurt me because those are people who are ghost followers. They really don't, sit around and engage with my stuff. So everything needs to be about providing value. And what I would be looking at, and I am looking at now, is who is doing the content the best. And more importantly, when I look across the spectrum of content, what is the content that is getting, what are the commonalities that are getting? There's always this 3-second, very quick hook. There's these sharp sort of transitions. There's really good value in this stuff. There's an infotainment sort of factor that it's, and of course, part of this is I'm not an entertaining dude, right? Like I'm just not, right? I'm just a dude I'm a teacher. So we do have to live with how we are, and just do the content anyway. I will say this though, entertainers, they grow their content pretty fast, but they don't really monetize it as well. Educators, I think they grow their content sort of more slowly, but they can monetize it better. Now, if you could be both, and do sort of an educator and an entertainer, which I'm trying to be more of, I think that's the sweet spot. And that's what you sort of want to focus on. And the other thing I'll say here is that, and it's a pain in the ass, but it just needs to be done. I think the days of marrying yourself to one platform are also gone. Like to me, I go, get yourself a podcast, get yourself an email list so you own that stuff. And then look at next down the tier, look at some of these platforms that give you better ownership over your people. So to me, that's YouTube, that's Substack, stuff like that. And then third, you look at the place that has a lot of the eyeballs, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, those kinds of things. And then fourth, you look and say, which of these platforms that I don't necessarily love are potentially a good opportunity to get in early, right? So I don't know, like I don't use Snapchat. I'm not on Snapchat. That's for younger kids. But if the trend continues, who knows, maybe Snapchat will end up being a place. And so as you build your business, I think you look at that. But in the beginning, I think for people who are just starting in the beginning, I think it's more, it's better to focus maybe on one or two platforms, build your thing, but quickly distribute. Right. And it's really just about checking in with yourself and going, how much of this can I handle? The stuff we talked about today, Michael, is monumental, right? In terms of this is why it's nice to have these conversations, because it took 20 years to learn all the things that I'm telling you. And sometimes you have to just step back and go, okay, wait a second, Jade, you just hit me with a tsunami of, a shitstorm of stuff, like what do I focus on? So as we end this, let's go back and just basically go, be yourself and be authentic. Focus on the things that you can focus on now. Focus on, if you're brand new at this, focus on revenue. Just get your revenue up. Once you get to 1 million, right? Because that 0 to 1, which I'm doing right now, is a tough place to be, and you're throwing a lot of stuff at the wall. And and maybe it's just 0 to 100,000, whatever it is, because you might want to just be building this time millionaires type of business. It's hard though, and you're throwing a lot of stuff at the wall. I would say at this point, if you're brand new to this, you focus, you stay authentic, you really get dialed in on your value. And that's where to start. And then you put in the reps. And as we know, in anything in life, you put in the reps. Nothing is easy. Easy is earned. You have to get out there and take the licks.
And do it consistently. I think, is the key.
Mm-hmm.
And not expecting, or just looking at the analytics too much, along the way. Just, what I'm learning and being advised is just, you know, post every day for the next 50 days, or every other day or once a week or whatever it is, but consistently. And don't worry if it completely bombs. Don't worry if it, hits hugely, but learn from each step and just say, I'm going to commit to that. Again, whether it's a workout program or it's a social media channel, it's the putting in the reps consistently along the way. I'll just throw out the last thing I heard recently: curiosity, fear, and desire are three of the things that really get a lot of eyeballs on, especially if it's included in the thumbnail or included in the title of social media things. And you were talking about the content, and you're not an entertainer, but I find your content very entertaining. It does hook me, and there's a trust element as well. That I know that it's vetted, it's credentialed, right? It's not just something that's going to be a hot topic. So even though you're looking at what gets likes and what's interesting to people, it's also very trustworthy, and that's something that is not everything out there is. So
Yeah.
especially when you're leading with curiosity, fear, and desire. So
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And I guess I'll leave people with this. I mean, I've definitely I've gotten a lot of hate and a lot of love. And one of the things I would say is, because this is what's going to happen when you go out with your content, you have to focus on doing your thing. So when people come with critiques, because they will, and in the beginning they'll be sure, it's like you got to be ready. You got to have the courage to be disliked and the courage to be ignored as you begin this. And so from my perspective, though, when someone hits you with something that is going to trigger you or makes you feel like, they came down hard on it, to me, it's like, just kill them with good content, right? So it's not killing with kindness, it's killing with good content. And also, don't be afraid to be putting your boundaries up. We don't like, to me, I have a zero tolerance policy for people who are rude. Now, I kind of like, like with when the Lane Nortons and people like that, come after me and stuff. I kind of like that, right? Because these are people who, they do, from my perspective, we may not agree on things, but I'm someone who likes debate. I might disagree with the way they do it, but I like it. And to me, you learn from that stuff, but I don't think, if people are being assholes, you can certainly just block them. And, that old thing, don't feed the trolls, but just do great work. If you're proud of what you're doing, it doesn't matter what anyone else says. And I do appreciate that. It feels good to hear you say that. And I will say I'm proud of what I do, but I want to do it much better. And I do like where things are heading because it's forcing us all to get better.
yeah. Yeah, and one of the themes that comes up a lot in my podcast is vocation and calling, and it seems like this is truly your calling. I mean, you've been pursuing this trajectory since you came out of medical school, and for decades. This is the trajectory, this is the thing that you just can't not do. You have to do this because it's in you, and there's so much more that you have to give to the world in this arena. So keep doing what you're doing, brother.
I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you so much. And thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. Any closing thoughts?
I would just say that from my perspective, that last thing you said is like, lead with purpose. Try not to lead with ego. It's hard to do, but yeah, you're right. I have to do this. It's my purpose. When my ego gets in the way, that's when things get messy. And then the only other thing I'll say is you guys can find me at Jade Teta on social media, nextlevelhuman.com and Next Level Human podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much, brother.
Great to be here, bro.
You've been listening to Performance Lab. I'm Dr. Michael Donovan, reminding you that peak performance is a journey, not a destination. For more cutting-edge insights and actionable tips, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media. Until next time, keep pushing your limits and stay tuned to the Performance Lab.